Welcome to the Astronomers for Planet Earth webinar series, hosted by Dr. Travis Rector, Professor of Astrophysics at University of Alaska, Anchorage. Today's guest is Olivier Berné. Olivier is a research scientist in astrophysics at CNRS in Toulouse, the French National Center for Scientific Research. He is co-founder of the 1.5 Lab project, which aims to reduce the carbon footprint of research in France.
Our guest speaker today is Olivier Berné, who is a senior research scientist at Toulouse, France. And in his talk today, he's going to be telling us about how he's been organizing his fellow scientists to address climate change and to reach the goal of keeping the temperature decrease below 1.5 degrees Celsius. Olivier, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. So yes, thank you, Travis. I will start with the presentation right away. So I will be talking about this initiative that is called Labo 1.5. So Labo is a short version of lab in French. And so the goal of this initiative is to, as it's said on this slide, transforming research collectively in the context of climate change. So this is an initiative that we started about 2 years ago with Tamara Benari, who is an environmental scientist, and we've been working on this project for now about 2 years, and I will try to show a few results that we obtained so far. So I will start with a very brief context, and this is the context of climate change. And I want to insist on something maybe a bit specific, which is that something that maybe we can say has changed in the last couple of years is that we're experiencing physically climate change because there are more and more events, dramatic events. And this way, climate change has become really a reality that we are experiencing almost now every day in our lives. And this is even more pregnant with the very recent heat wave in North America with new all-time records in temperature. And in this context, what the feeling that has emerged everywhere among scientists, and for now I will be focusing on the case of France, is that we scientists cannot continue business as usual, and that we have to change our practices, our professional practices, to try and mitigate the effects of climate change. So the way this whole project started was by a publication in the newspaper, the national newspaper Le Monde, and we wrote this open letter, which was called In Face of Climate Emergency, Scientists Must Reduce Their Impact on the Environment. And associated to this open letter, we created a website and invited the scientists from all disciplines to join us. And in fact, quite quickly, we were joined by tens and then hundreds of scientists who wanted to participate in this effort. So now the Labo 1.5 initiative gathers about 600 scientists from all disciplines. You have here the disciplines. It's in French, but I'm sure you can find your way out. And these hundreds of scientists are spread into 6 different teams with different objectives. I'm not going to describe them in details, but I'll give you the results that these teams have provided. And there is a steering committee of about, well, actually exactly 10 people that are leading this large project. So what have we been doing in the last 2 years? Well, the first thing that we were interested in was providing an open access tool to assess the carbon footprint of research. And more specifically, we wanted to provide a tool for research labs to measure their footprints by their own. So it's not a tool for individuals, it's a tool for research labs. And we also wanted to use this to feed a national database containing the footprints of all these research labs in France, so as to derive an estimate of the national footprint of the entire sector of scientific research. So this project was led by Odile Blanchard, who is an economist, and Jérôme Mariette, who is a computer scientist. And the first step in this project was to define a protocol and a perimeter. So the first protocol and perimeter includes the emissions associated to buildings, electricity, heating, and fluids in the research labs, and the travels, so professional travel and commuting from home to the office. The second version of this tool, which will be issued probably next fall, will also include the numeric impact and purchases. And finally, in 2022, we also want to include the carbon footprint of research infrastructure and shared equipment. So that means, for instance, typically a telescope falls in this perimeter. So what does the tool look like? It's something like this. It's an online tool, but you're free to copy the code if you want to use strictly the underlying code, which is open source. And what you do if you're using this interface is you simply give it a number of information that you can obtain in principle from the director of your institute or your research lab. And from that, the tool computes with the help of a number of emission factors, a carbon footprint. And this is what you see here. It shows the distribution of the emissions as a function of the different sources. So it can be buildings, it can be the travel, etc. It's in French for now, but we're currently working on an international version, an English version of this tool. You can also visualize the results graphically through the interface directly. So it means that if you don't want to go in all the details, you can really have the results in a quite straightforward way directly with the online tool. So this is all described in a preprint with references here, and we've submitted this work, the details of the tool to a scientific journal, and it's currently under revision. But you can already access the paper itself over there. We also have some preliminary results with this tool. So the GES 1.5, that's the name of the tool. GES means is the acronym for greenhouse gas in French. Has been recommended by the CNRS, which is the National Institution for Research in France. And so that covers about 1,000 research labs in France. So this tool was recommended to these 1,000 labs, and already nearly more than 200 of them have engaged in the measurement of their carbon footprint. And about 30 of them have completed the measurement of their carbon footprint. That means they had the time to gather all the necessary information. Knowing that we made public this tool only 6 months ago, so this number is growing every week. And what we obtained for now in this preliminary result is the following distribution. That's the raw emissions and their distribution. And you can see here that the median for commutes here is of the order of a few 10 to the 4 kilograms of CO2 equivalents. And the other main sources of emissions are the heating of the buildings and professional travel. So I want to insist that this is preliminary, and what we understand from our current work is that there will be an important additional source of emission, which is what concerns purchases. Everything that you buy at the lab has a carbon footprint, and this will be most likely with the same order of magnitude as commutes, heating, and travels. So of course, this is useful for getting a map of the distribution of sources of emissions in different labs. We can compare the labs by disciplines, and we can also compare the labs as a function of where they are situated in the national territory. For instance, if you have a lab that is in the middle of Paris, or if it's somewhere in the suburbs of southern France near Toulouse, which is my case. And so we expect to also see differences there in terms of the main sources of emission. So something that is useful is once a research lab conducts its own, the measurement of its own carbon footprint, is then to try and reduce this carbon footprint. That's really the aim. The measurement is just the first step to know where you can have a reduction. And so we started a project we call that the experimentation. And that's led by Audrey Sabat and Olivier Berné. And the idea, and for now we have just a pilot project, is that labs, and now we have already 17 labs involved, will measure their footprint with the GES 1.5 tool, and then they will discuss at the scale of their lab how to reduce their footprint, for instance, by using quotas, by using taxes, by using other incitative strategies with scenarios. And they will share the information between these 17 labs in the pilot project, and to see, what are the good ways forward to reduce the carbon footprint. We wish to scale up to the largest possible number of labs in 2022. As I said earlier, there are more than 1,000 research labs in France, and we expect that there will be a growing number of them that will be involved in this project of sharing the information on how to concretely reduce the carbon footprint. Another aspect of the work we have done in the Labo 1.5 initiative was to conduct sociological and ethnographical surveys in the scientific community. So we conducted, and this was coordinated by Milan Bouchevala, who is a sociologist, an online sociological survey. And we randomly selected 30,000 scientists in a control sample of 130,000 members of the academia. And we got about 7,000 responses. So that's a response rate of 25%, which is, according to our colleagues in sociology, typically what you expect. You see here the distribution of disciplines in the respondents of this survey. And what you can see is that basically we have a good coverage of various disciplines. In parallel to this quantitative survey, we also have a more ethnographical approach, and that's done by Antoine Hardy, who is a PhD student. And he's conducting semi-supervised interviews in research labs. So he goes to research labs and he interviews scientists to try and understand from an ethnographical point of view what governs their practices, their behaviors, and how and what is their perception of their condition in the context of climate change as scientists. So I don't have the time to show you all the results of this sociological survey. You can go to this link where there are more details on the raw results of this survey. Unfortunately, it's in French for the moment, but we also expect to have a translation in English for the international community. However, I will show you some first analyses that we have conducted, and this concerns the change in professional practices. So we asked that question as part of the survey. Do you think that climate emergency imposes profound changes to our professional practices? And the answer to that question is at a very high level that people think, yes, they agree that we need to change our professional practices. This is something that we had already seen in preliminary surveys conducted in 2018 and 2019, where also most scientists agreed that we need to change our practices. And you can see that this is very constant across disciplines. It doesn't matter which discipline you're in. Everyone in the scientific community thinks that we need to change. Now, do people actually change? This is another question that was in the survey. In 2019, did you forego or cancel one or more business trips due to environmental considerations? And you see that here, only 14% of the respondents say yes, they did change their practice. They modified their approach of their, for instance, of going to a meeting for environmental reasons. And that the vast majority, in fact, did not change their practices. So, this raises a question. On one side, everyone says, yes, we need to change, but in practice, most people say they have not changed. And so there is an apparent contradiction, and there are risks associated to this contradiction. For instance, this is a caption from a newspaper in France. It's a conservative newspaper, Le Point, and the title says, researchers who fly the most are climate experts. And so, of course, you can see in this newspaper article what's underlying. It's a form of climate denial. The fact that, you know, scientists tell everyone what they should do, but they are not applying the changes, the recommendations to themselves, so that there is a sort of a form of hypocrisy. And, you know, if you go one step further, should we believe climate scientists if, you know, they're flying all the time? So the question we want to address is, why are people in academia not changing their practices? So the way we address this is with the tools of social science and statistics, with the on the basis of the national survey we conducted. And to do that, we use core concepts of field theory in sociology. And what we assume is that academia is a global field of power where the social agents, here it's the members of the academia, compete to obtain various forms of capital. Capital in the field of academia is constituted by, for instance, publication, citation, prizes, grants, funding, etc. So if the obtention of a capital in academia requires to spend CO2, then the agents in this field of power will spend CO2 to succeed. So we can reformulate our question as the following: is the obtention of capital in the academic field associated with increased CO2 emissions? So we cannot measure all forms of capital in academia in a single study, because there are many forms of academic capital, so it's complicated. So we focus on what we call bibliometric capital, which is the ensemble of bibliometric indicators available to an individual and which constitute an asset for success in academia. And in particular, we focus on the number of publications and H-index as a direct tracer of what we call bibliometric capital. And so the question is the number of publication and H-index associated with emissions of CO2? So we compare the H-index and number of publications of scientists with their number of flights. So this is what is shown here. So this is the number of publication as a function of number of flights. If we start with this box here, you have, for those who took 0 flight in 2019, the median number of publication is about 4. And when you move to those who flew the most, above 10, here you have a median which is above 10 publications. And for those who really fly the most, above 20 flights, this value is near 20. The median number of publication is near 20. So we performed a linear regression analysis to test if this association between number of publications and number of flights is robust. And we conclude with strong confidence that with this very low p-value, that indeed there is an association between these two variables at a very high statistical level. We included some control variables, so gender, age, and discipline. So it means that even when you include those variables, you do find a very strong association, so that flying is really a strong predictor of the number of publications of a researcher. So the same happens if you look at H-index. It's not as strong as for the number of publication, but yet you do see this similar association, and it's also verified with at high statistical significance. So the bottom line is that strong publication rate and H-index are significantly associated with higher individual air travel induced greenhouse gas emission. And so that there is a carbon footprint that is associated with the construction of bibliometric capital in academia. And in fact, one way out is to lower the competition and rethink the criteria of evaluation, to have something that is more in favor of collaboration. And this can have a number of co-benefits. I want to sort of give a bit broader overview of this way out and the benefits that it can have. So I said that, this context of a strong competition in academia results in in an enhanced footprint for those who win in this game. But there are also benefits in reducing this competition elsewhere. For instance, this is the result of work conducted by Nathalie Webb in France on postdocs. And you see here that half of the postdocs say they feel external pressure to work outside legal hours, so that they also feel that there is a lot of pressure in this competition. And also gender discrimination. So this is a result of a study we published last year on gender discrimination in astronomy in France. And here what we show is that female answer much more that they consider that having children is an obstacle in their career than men. And so this is also connected, of course, to this very strong competition in which female who have who bear the responsibility to raise their children have more difficulties to succeed than men. So overall, we think that reducing the competition can have a lot of benefits in terms of the carbon footprint, but also in terms of the social conditions in which research is being done everywhere. So yes, globally, we need to question these current social conditions of the production of astronomical and scientific knowledge in general. So this last message is something that is more political than truly scientific result, of course. And this is also to make the transition with the fact that in the Labo 1.5 project, we also have an aim to exist in the political scene and not just inside academia, because if we want things to change, we need to exist in the political scene. So there is a group that is led by Patrick and Bell, that is a kind of a think tank in which we try to produce texts that we publish and that we advertise. So this is an example of a text that was produced by Labo 1.5 and published, and that was giving an opinion about current reforms in France of research and how these reforms should take into account the environmental footprint of research. And this work was then cited in several newspapers. And so we believe that this can contribute to create some incentives for policymakers to take this into account in their projects. There is also an aspect in Labo 1.5, which is education. So there is a working group led by a physicist with Guillaume Blanc. And he is really trying to work on the educational aspect and on the lectures at the university on climate change, so that this is also for the awareness in the higher education. Okay, the last point I want to mention is that we have been able, after these 2 years of work, to create what is called in France Groupement de Recherche. And that is a research project that is financially and logistically supported by 3 national institutions in France, CNRS, INRAE, and ADEME. And so we have a total budget for the next 2 years of 300,000 euros. And the expected duration of this project is at least 5 years. So, of course, this is something that is very French, but what the message here for you is that it is possible to demonstrate to the public institutions, to the research institutions, that they can engage in this process and that they can support this process. It has been a lot of effort to sort of motivate this institution. At the beginning, there were a lot of they were not very supportive, but in the end, they really helped us. And now we have something that is quite solid and with which we can work for the next 5 years with their financial support. So the core team of this project is comprises of many different scientists from different fields. And we also have a scientific council with people from the IPCC, for instance, which help us to keep the right path. And overall, we have high expectations that this will be very helpful to change the way research is done in France. One last word before I finish is that this has been something done really at the level of France, because this was a start and this was easiest for us because we were already focusing on all disciplines. So we couldn't do all disciplines and all fields of research at the international scale. That would have been too much. But now we are in the process of going to an international level and discussing with many different institutions and scientists from everywhere, so as to share our experience and also share the tool that we have developed with possible adaptations, for instance, in the UK right now or elsewhere. So I just want to finish by thanking all the people that are involved in this Labo 1.5 initiative, and some of the names are here on this site. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Olivier. That's really interesting. And I look forward to the Q&A session that comes out of this. I know that I have a lot of questions for you. So if you're watching this video, is either before or after the Q&A session. And if it's before the Q&A session, you can put your questions in the comments below on YouTube. And if it's after the Q&A session, there will be a link available for you to go and watch the discussion. So thank you again, and I look forward to our future discussion about this.
We hope you've enjoyed today's talk. Each of our talks is followed with a Q&A session that you can learn more about in the video description. If you're interested in Astronomers for Planet Earth, you can learn more at our website, astronomersforplanet.earth, and on social media as well. If you would like to be notified about future talks and events, please follow and join us.